Hi guys, it's Danny. So, something about me is that I love movies, and I've always loved movies, especially being able to analyze and extract details from my favorites. In 2014, Damien Chazelle released a movie called Whiplash. I'm sure you guys have heard about it. It's a fantastic movie that got J.K. Simmons his very first Oscar nomination for his supporting role as Terrence Fletcher. This movie actually won 3 out of their 5 nominations just at the Oscars that year, which is crazy considering this was Damien Chazelle's first big movie. He was 29 at the time, getting a Best Picture and Best Director nomination. He finally got the Best Director 2 years later with La La Land, that got 14 nominations and 6 wins, only one Oscar away from breaking the record for most awards won in one year. His directorial debut wasn't a huge hit, but he had written some movies that got pretty good traction, like 10 Cloverfield Lane. Whiplash was the movie that really made people realize that Chazelle just might be our generation's Scorsese. He has a way with characters that make the audience form deep emotional and personal moments that suck you into the film. At some point, you forget you're even watching a movie, and you just become a part of the story. Needless to say, I will be spoiling the movie, but I highly recommend this movie to anybody. It's a great watch. So let's start by summarizing the film. Andrew Naiman is a freshman at the Schaefer School of Music. He's a talented drummer but has a few social quirks. He's quiet and shy, very apologetic, but extremely motivated. He doesn't have many friends and spends quite a bit of time with his dad, who's not too fond of his future goals. When Terrence Fletcher, a world-renowned band professor at the school, sees him play in the first scene, it ignites a new road for Andrew. He sees an opportunity to make a name for himself, and he eventually gets a spot as an alternate drummer in the Schaefer Conservatory Band, which is no small feat. Quickly, he realizes that it's not all smooth sailing, and Terrence Fletcher is an abusive professor that will cross every line possible to get the best performance out of his players. He hurls chairs at Andrew, he slaps him, calls him names, digs into his family dynamics, makes him play for hours into the morning until he gets a single section of a song completely perfect. Fletcher does all of this because he sees something in Andrew, and he's on his own mission to find and train a generational legend. In the past, his attempts haven't led anywhere, and in fact, the last guy he took under his wing ended up committing suicide because of all the trauma Fletcher caused him while he was in the band. Still, Neiman does everything possible to become the best. He leaves his girlfriend, gets in fights with his family, dedicates every second to playing the drums, even moving a mattress into the rehearsal room. Eventually, a horrible car accident brings Andrew's dreams to a halt. He is kicked out of the band, and a lawyer approaches Andrew to talk about a lawsuit that has to do with the former student who committed suicide. Being promised to remain anonymous, Andrew complies. Fletcher is fired, and Andrew gives up drumming, returning to a passionless and mundane life for a while. That is until he runs into Fletcher at a bar, who offers Andrew a drumming gig for a smaller band, something less serious than what he's used to, but he tells him that it's the same songs he's used to playing. Turns out to be revenge on Andrew for getting him fired and tarnishing his name. Andrew embarrasses himself in front of very important people in the industry and leaves the stage in tears, running towards his father, but he storms back on stage and plays the best drum solo Fletcher has ever seen. So, I will never stop thinking this movie is an absolute masterpiece, and it's a huge reason why I want to create films as my career. Reading through what was written on the script versus how it's seen on the screen, the actors did such an amazing job at portraying their characters. This obsessed artist story doesn't lack much. The plot doesn't move quickly, but it's a necessary slow burn. The adrenaline that comes from big scenes like the car crash, the folder scene, and of course the grand finale give a bigger punch compared to the more mundane scenes. I'm not too familiar with jazz music or drums, but from what I've heard from actual musicians, the movie didn't do such a good job at getting accuracy of the genre of jazz. While music is obviously relevant in this movie, in my opinion, it's also just as irrelevant. As I mentioned, the story is about an obsessed artist and the lengths he will go to be, quote-unquote, one of the greats. To me, the music is amazing, and I find myself craving listening to these jazz songs that I would have never heard on my own. Maybe it would bug me more if I was more educated on the importance behind the music, but that's next on my list of research. Maybe I'll change my mind with the rating I gave it of 10 out of 10. The stress this movie induces is captivating. The story is one of hard work and dedication, and it can't be rushed into something that has action at every corner, or else Andrew's journey to be one of the greats would be lost in the molds of unrealistic excitement. The lows in this movie are many and the highs are few, but when they do happen, you feel them within yourself. It's as if you're sharing emotions with Andrew, and you get frustrated at Fletcher just as Andrew does. Chazelle does an amazing job of pushing emotion through the lens to the audience, and that's what makes this movie so great. So let's talk about the chair scene. This is the first real psychologically abusive part of the movie. This is Andrew's first day in the band, and Andrew rushes a song a hair in Fletcher's words, causing him to hurl a chair at his head. He gets in his face, he screams at him, he slaps him. This is a direct quote from the script. You are a worthless, friendless little piece of crap whose mommy ran out on daddy once she realized he wasn't Eugene O'Neill, and who's now weeping and slobbering all over my drum kit like a 15-year-old girl. So this happens at the end of Act 1. Now, Andrew's dilemma is clear. He now knows what he's gotten himself into, and the question is, will he give up on his dreams and keep his sanity, or will he sacrifice his mental state just to have this opportunity to make a name for himself? Of course, he doubles down, practicing through bloody hands, and this leads us into the next big scene at the beginning of Act 2. This is the folder scene. This is my favorite scene. So this scene is right before he actually plays Whiplash for the first time on stage. This is what's going on. Right now, Andrew is an alternate to Carl, the core drummer. Carl gives Andrew the folder with sheet music. Andrew sets it down for 1 second, and then it disappears. When it's time to get back on stage, they break the news to Fletcher that Andrew lost the folder, to which he responds, Carl, the folder is your responsibility, just play the song. Carl says he doesn't know it by heart, but Andrew did, so he's able to play the song on stage. I usually hate loose ends in a movie, but it never really bugs me that we never got real clarity on what happened to the folder. We see the shot of Andrew setting the folder down on the chair. He eavesdrops on a conversation. No one walks behind him, nor would anyone be actively searching for folders to steal. So people had the idea that Andrew purposefully lost the folder so he could show Fletcher that he has what it takes to be a part of this band, but I think that's highly unlikely considering the way that Fletcher has acted towards Andrew up until that point. Andrew right now isn't a character to take malicious risks like that to boost himself up in the band. Well, not yet anyway, but I would have considered it if this scene was further into the film. After paying a little bit more attention, I figured out that Chazelle actually does let us know it was Fletcher who took the folder. So now why would Fletcher steal his core drummer's folder and risk sabotaging his own band? Like I said, Fletcher sees something in Andrew, and that much is obvious, or else Andrew would have never been allowed into the studio band. He needs to know that Andrew wants this as bad as he needs him to want this. What a better way to do that than to put Andrew directly in the hot seat, under the microscope, in a tight corner, you know? So under pressure, and Fletcher believes that pressure makes diamonds. Fletcher pushes Andrew to his limits through the entire film. No one can deny the extremities of his teaching methods. All Fletcher wants is to be able to teach one of the greats, and Andrew just wants to be one of the greats. There couldn't be a better combo in theory. Fletcher was sure that Carl wouldn't have known the music by heart, and Carl brings up his medical condition where he needs visual cues and says to Fletcher, "You know this." If that's true, which we have no reason to presume Carl is a liar, then Fletcher has a surefire way to see if Andrew was taking this seriously as Fletcher hopes he would. I assume that if Andrew didn't step up and say that he could play without the sheet music, Fletcher would have pulled out a backup and voila. Band goes on, Carl plays, Andrew's kicked out of the band. But that's not what happened, obviously. This is why this scene is the most important scene of the entire movie, I would say. It sets everything in motion, and it shows the lengths that Fletcher will go through to find his Charlie Parker, and it gives the gratification Andrew needs from working so hard. This becomes his drug. His drug is the satisfaction that knowing he's the best. He's the only one who can do what he does. Being on top becomes more important to him than anything. His relationships, his family, his school, his mental health, his physical health. This clue isn't obvious, and it's ridiculously easy to look over. I don't even like calling it a clue. So, when Carl is first introduced into the story, we see a glimpse of his sheet music. It seems like an innocent shot, especially with the editing style of the movie. It's set scene, B-roll, long B-roll, more B-roll, and then more of the scene. I wouldn't have ever caught on to it if I hadn't watched this movie about a million times. This shot I was talking about with Carl's sheet music, he had written louder and softer on the pages of Whiplash, the song. The book given to Andrew by Fletcher at the end of the movie is the exact same one with all of the same notes. If you read the script, a janitor was actually the one who took it. He threw it away by accident. There's an entire scene where one of the workers hands it back to Andrew in front of Carl, but much of the script is improvised to fit their low budget and compact shooting schedule. But I like this change. I really do. The last thing I'll talk about is the grand finale. So Chazelle has a thing with last looks, which I'll get into later. The lead up is important. So after the folder scene, Andrew's ego grows. He's practicing harder than ever, insulting his family, his bandmates, even attacking Fletcher on stage at the end of Act 2. So Fletcher set up Andrew for failure in the last concert, but when he comes back on stage and plays the greatest impromptu drum solo, he's looking for Fletcher's approval. His father stands on side stage with a look of sadness. He realizes that his son is lost forever, but Andrew never looks towards his dad at all. He only looks at Fletcher. He waits until his teacher smiles, and he smiles back. Then it's cut to black, and the movie ends. This last look is closure on the story arc. So Andrew will become one of the greats at any cost, and Fletcher is found as Charlie Parker. Explaining it sounds a little bit unsatisfying, but once you've been in the story for 90 minutes, it's perfect. This ending wrapped up Andrew Neiman's want and his need to be perfect and to be great. Rarely can a character have the same want and need, but in this case, I don't see it any other way. His character development is shown with just that last look. And yeah, that's it. There's so much of this movie that I wish to have gone over more, but I would have been here for a while. Right now, Whiplash is on Netflix, and I strongly encourage y'all to see it if you haven't had the chance to yet. But thanks for listening. Bye-bye.